whispers in the shadows. As the sun began to set, Sarah walked along the deserted street, her heart pounding with each step. The streets were always empty in this part of town, and she had grown used to the eerie quietness of her surroundings. But today was different. Today, she had a sense of unease that she couldn't shake off. She tried to focus on the music playing in her earbuds to distract herself, but it was no use. The feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. She turned around, scanning the deserted street behind her, but there was no one there, or at least no one she could see. Her heart racing, she picked up her pace, eager to get home as quickly as possible. But then she heard it, a soft whisper, almost too quiet to hear. She paused, looking around again. Still nothing. She shook her head, chiding herself for being so paranoid. She must be imagining things. She resumed walking, trying to ignore the nagging feeling of being followed. But then she heard the whisper again, this time louder and more distinct. Sarah. Her heart stopped. How did they know her name? She whipped around, frantically searching for the source of the voice. And then she saw it. A figure stood at the end of the street, its face obscured by the shadows. She couldn't make out any features, but she could feel its size on her. She froze, too scared to move. And then the figure began to move towards her, slowly and deliberately. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. It was as if she was rooted to the spot, held in place by an invisible force. The figure drew closer, and she could see now that it was a man. A tall, lanky man with long arms and fingers that seemed to stretch towards her. She could hear his ragged breathing, and she could smell his rank breath. She tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. The man was now only a few feet away, and she could see that his face was twisted into a grotesque grin. And then he lunged at her, and everything went dark. When Sarah opened her eyes, she was no longer on the empty street. Instead, she was lying on a cold stone floor in a dimly lit room. The air was musty and thick with the smell of dampness and decay. Panic flooded her body, and she scrambled to her feet, looking around frantically. The room was small and windowless, with walls made of rough-hewn stone. In the center of the room was a large wooden table, covered in strange symbols and dark stains. In the corner, she could make out a pile of bones and what looked like human skulls. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to figure out where she was and who had brought her here. She had heard about kidnappings and human trafficking on the news, but she never thought it could happen to her. She was just a normal college student, with no enemies or secrets. But as she looked around the room, she realized that this was not a random act of violence. The symbols on the table were familiar to her, though she couldn't quite place where she had seen them before. They looked ancient, like something out of a history book. She approached the table, her heart racing as she tried to decipher the symbols. As she touched them, a cold chill ran down her spine. She felt like she was being watched, like something was lurking in the shadows. And then she heard the whisper again, this time closer and more insistent. Sarah. She spun around, but there was no one there. Just the shadows, shifting and moving as if alive. Who's there? She called out, her voice echoing through the empty room. No response. Just the sound of her own breathing and the faint drip of water from somewhere. She took a step back, her heart pounding. She needed to get out of here, but she didn't know how. The walls looked solid, with no doors or windows. And even if she could escape, where would she go? She had no idea where she was or how far from home. As she pondered her situation, she heard footsteps outside the room. They were slow and deliberate, coming closer and closer. She backed away from the door, her heart racing as she tried to think of a plan. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and Sarah held her breath, waiting for whatever was on the other side to reveal itself. She could hear a faint murmuring, as if someone was talking to themselves. And then the door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was the man from the street, the one who had whispered her name. He was tall and gaunt, with wild hair and a thin-lipped smile that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. He was wearing a long black robe, with strange symbols embroidered on the sleeves. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his voice a low hiss. "I've been waiting for you." Sarah tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. She was trapped, alone with this madman in a dungeon. "Who are you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man laughed, a high-pitched cackle that echoed through the room. "Who am I?" "I am the one who has been watching you, Sarah. Watching and waiting. Waiting for the moment when you would come to me." Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. What did he mean by that? What did he want with her? The man stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "You have a gift, Sarah. A gift that few possess. The gift of sight." Sarah's mind raced. What was he talking about? She didn't have any special abilities or... The man stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "You have a gift, Sarah. A gift that few possess. The gift of sight." Sarah's mind raced. What was he talking about? She didn't have any special abilities or powers. The man continued. "You can see things that others cannot, Sarah. Things that are beyond the scope of human understanding. Things that can change the course of history." Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "I don't know what you're talking about. Please, let me go. I won't tell anyone about this." The man chuckled. "You misunderstand, Sarah. You are not here to leave. You are here to stay. To help me with a very important task." Sarah's eyes widened in fear. She tried to run, but the man was quick to grab her by the arm. "I have been searching for someone like you for a very long time, Sarah. Someone with the gift of sight. Someone who can help me unlock the secrets of the universe." He dragged her to the table in the center of the room and pushed her down onto the hard wooden surface. The symbols on the table were glowing, pulsating with a dark energy that seemed to emanate from the man himself. "Tell me what you see, Sarah. Tell me what the symbols show you." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to block out the horror of her situation. But as soon as she opened them again, she saw the symbols on the table morphing into strange shapes and patterns. The man leaned closer, his eyes glittering with excitement. "What do you see, Sarah? What does it mean?" Sarah spoke hesitantly. "I see a darkness, a void. It's growing, expanding. It's going to swallow everything, the whole world. We need to stop it." The man's eyes widened in glee. Yes, that's it. We need to stop it. "And you, Sarah, are going to help me do just that." Sarah tried to pull away, but the man held her down with a strength that belied his frail appearance. "I'm not going to help you do anything, you crazy old man. Let me go." The man shook his head. "I cannot let you go, Sarah. You are too valuable to me. You see things that others cannot, and I need your help to save the world from the darkness that is coming." Sarah was terrified. "What do you mean? What darkness? How can I help?" The man's eyes gleamed with a fanatical light. "You are going to help me summon the Great Old One. The one who will save us all from the darkness." Sarah recoiled. "No, I won't do it. I won't help you summon some ancient god or demon. You're insane." The man's grip tightened. "You have no choice, Sarah. You are bound to me now, through the symbols on the table. You must do as I say, or suffer the consequences." Sarah struggled to break free, but the man was too strong. She realized with a sickening feeling that he was right. She was trapped, a prisoner of this madman's will. The man began to chant. his voice rising in pitch and intensity. The symbols on the table glowed brighter, and the air grew thick with the smell of brimstone and sulfur. Sarah watched in horror as the symbols began to twist and writhe, taking on a life of their own. They coalesced into a dark shape, a twisting vortex of black energy that pulsed and throbbed like a living thing. The man continued to chant, his voice growing louder and more frenzied. The symbols on the table grew brighter. Sarah felt her sanity slipping away as she watched the dark shape coalesce on the table. She knew that this was no ordinary summoning ritual, that the man's intentions were far more sinister than she could have imagined. As the dark shape began to take on a solid form, Sarah felt a wave of dread wash over her. She knew that whatever was being summoned was not a force for good. It was something that should have remained buried, hidden away in the depths of the earth, never to be disturbed. The man's chanting reached a crescendo, and the dark shape began to solidify into a figure. Sarah could barely make out its features through the haze of fear and confusion that clouded her mind. The figure stepped forward, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. Sarah felt a primal fear grip her heart as she looked upon its grotesque form. It was not human, or was it any creature that she had ever seen before? Its skin was an oily black, and its limbs seemed to stretch on forever, like the tendrils of some terrible octopus. Its face was a mass of writhing tentacles, and its eyes glowed with a sickly green light that seemed to penetrate to the very depths of her soul. The man bowed before the creature, his voice trembling with awe and reverence. "O Great One, we have summoned you to save us from the darkness. We beseech you, take us under your protection and show us the way." The creature's voice was like 1,000 whispers, all speaking at once. It filled the room, drowning out all other sounds, and Sarah felt her mind slipping away as she listened to its terrible words. "You have done well, mortals. You have summoned me, and in doing so, you have ensured your own doom. For I am not a savior, but a destroyer. I will take what I want, and leave the rest to rot in the darkness." The man fell to his knees, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and awe. Sarah knew that there was no hope for her, that she had been caught in a web of madness and despair that would never release her. The creature turned its eyes upon her, and she felt her mind shatter under its gaze. It reached out with its tentacles, and she knew that her fate was sealed. As the creature pulled her towards it, Sarah knew that there was no escape, that she was doomed to be consumed by the darkness. She closed her eyes and waited for the end, hoping that it would come quickly and mercifully. But the end did not come quickly, or was it merciful? The creature consumed her, body and soul, leaving nothing behind but a husk of what had once been a human being. The man watched as the creature consumed Sarah, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and awe. He knew that he had made a terrible mistake, that he had unleashed a force that he could not control. As the creature turned its attention to him, he knew that his fate was sealed. He fell to his knees, begging for mercy, but none was forthcoming. The creature consumed him, body and soul, leaving nothing behind but a husk of what had once been a human being. And so it was that the darkness consumed them both, leaving behind nothing but a void where once there had been life. A void that would stretch on forever, swallowing everything in its path, until there was nothing left but the darkness.